Welcome to Slasher Sunday. So we're going to do something a little different. We're going to talk about a season of a television series, and this should cover the next 5 weeks and give us a deadline, which we shouldn't have any problem completing.
No.
Right. As fast as we got through this in the last 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be very hard to complete the rest of the 4 seasons left in 4 weeks.
Yeah, I think we can do it.
We're good.
We're good.
So, Bates Motel. I've seen pretty much everything. She's seen none of it. She's a big Norman Bates Psycho fan. So, how did season 1? So, obviously, we're going to talk spoilers for season 1. If you haven't seen it, go watch it, catch up. You'll have time to do it as we progress through this show over the next 5 weeks. I covered all the Psycho movies outside of the 1987, I think. Bates Motel, Bud Court, freaking movie that was I think a pilot or something. But I've never even seen that, weirdly. One day we're going to watch it. Maybe we'll do that for week 6. Because it's, Bates Motel as well, but obviously something different. Really, really curious about that. I've heard it's dreadful. And Lori Petty's in it, so I'm super interested. But, moving on. What did you think of season 1 so far of Bates Motel? Did it live up to the Psycho legacy for you?
Yes. Yeah, I'm super into it. I think it's wonderful. I think it's a really cool, interpretation of what, leads up to the events of Psycho.
Yeah.
And I really like all of the intrigue in the town that's set up and all the mysteries going on.
Yeah.
I think that Vera Farmiga, is that how you say her last name?
I think so.
I never remember. She's wonderful.
Farmiga.
Farmiga?
Yeah. Something.
Yeah, she's just fantastic as Norma Bates. She's so crazy and manipulative, but also charming and sweet, but awful. So she's perfect. She's definitely a perfect Norma Bates. And Norman, who I don't know that
Freddie
actor.
Highmore.
Freddie Highmore.
Mm-hmm.
I actually really like him as well as Norman. I think he's doing a wonderful job. And I'm really into it. I love it.
With a show like this, obviously, casting is key when it comes to your 2 leads. Now, everything else obviously has to be good, but that's where it has to be stellar. And Norman and Norma have to have the right dynamic and the right feel for this to complement Psycho, right? And I don't think that they could have cast better on these 2 roles.
No, I think that they're perfect for each other.
Yes. And we're very lucky that we live in a time, I know this show's 10 years old now, which is really wild to me, but we are lucky that in the last decade or more now, that we live in a time where higher profile actors will take television series.
Sure.
And they'll take them seriously, and that we get true well-crafted dramas with incredible acting. I remember when I was a kid growing up, TV shows were, that was the downgrade. That was where your career went to die.
Yeah, you went
and
from TV
the
to
writing
movie.
on TV was subpar. And it is interesting to see these quality performances and writing on television, even though we're so used to it now. But I think 10 years ago, we were maybe still being wow, I can't believe we're getting quality TV. Now it's 10 years later. It's every other show that's on is incredible.
All about the series.
And the special effects and the acting and the directors and everything, all the big names work on TV now. So it is a little different.
The puppy's gone.
But the puppy's missing. Pardon the interruption by the dog once again. But yeah, so, okay. First things first. Let's talk about location. So they recreated the Bates Motel and the Bates house pretty much identically.
Yes.
Which was great, right? When we recently watched some of the Psycho remake. I showed her the Gus Van Sant one from the 90s with Anne Heche. I threw that on because she was watching Psycho, and I was like, do me a favor, just check this out so you can see what everyone's always talking about when it comes to this remake, because you had never seen it. And we made it maybe 15 minutes in before Kayla was like, please just no. Let's just shut this off. It's an inferior copy of the original. It's like, why wouldn't I just watch the original? And I agree.
Yeah.
And in that movie, they did not recreate the hotel, and they did not recreate the house, right? They used a new kind of look and location. And with this being more connected to the original, even though the time period is different, as is the physical location of the hotel. Mm-hmm. So the hotel in the show is in Oregon, and the location in the original 1960 Hitchcock film is in Fairvale, California, right up above San Francisco. So they did move it. I honestly don't know why. Maybe it's for plot elements or something, but I don't really see the reason. Like, who cares? Like, just make it the same town from the original film.
Yeah, I don't know. But I love that they've recreated the hotel and the house so perfectly, because, you know, the show obviously deals with new material leading up to the movie, I think is what you've told me. But having, like, I don't know, I think it wouldn't be as cool if the house and the hotel weren't, or the motel weren't created, you know?
We do get up to the events of the film and beyond them. So I don't want you to think this leaves off where the first movie starts or anything, which it just wouldn't make sense, because this is clearly a different time period. Right? And the elements that we know from the film, certain things that are said, don't line up with this anyway. This is just a reimagining of the Norman Bates Norma storyline, and they're using the same location, even though it's not the backlot at Universal. I think this was a set they actually built.
That's crazy.
Which is cool. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that this was actually filmed on the backlot. I can't imagine it was.
I mean, the town, it definitely isn't, obviously.
Sure.
The town, they were, like, for sure, like, on location somewhere.
Yeah. So, okay. Now this starts out with Norman's what we find out to be his first kill. Now this is, shrouded in a little bit of mystery, and you think maybe Norma did it. Maybe Norman did it. I don't know, because there is kind of a question mark lingering over the Bates family in general.
Right.
But especially with Norma and Norman, right? So when this started, what sense did you get about that? Were you like, it was Norman, it was Norma?
I think I was pretty much like, it was Norman that did it. Like, but it's hard because they do play it like, I don't know. I mean, we know stuff about Norma from the movie, but like getting to see her character, I was like, there could be a lot more, that she's done than just be a really awful mom.
Sure.
But I think I was pretty much like, yeah, like Norman for sure did that.
Now we get some kind of like precursors here to Norman's eventual mental collapse and what becomes the Norman Bates that we know from, the Anthony Perkins Hitchcock version, as to where he goes into mom mode and doesn't seem to be connected to his mom when he's doing it, right? Or to himself, should I say. And he has no memory of being mom when he does it. He legitimately thinks his mom is doing things. Now, this, of course, is a little different with the previous Norman that we see in here, as to where he just blacks out. But towards the end of the season, we see that his mother is the one instructing him to kill. Now, couple questions on that. Number one, do you think Norman, although we do see the scene play out, so we do get a scene where we see Norman go and hit his dad over the head, but is it possible that off screen before this happens that Norma is telling him to do it?
Yes.
Or is he just protecting his mom because it's his mom and he loves her, right? I'm leaning more towards that since we did see the scene play out, right? But it does raise that question of when he kills his teacher, is that the first time Norma talks to him? The way the scene plays, I do believe it is the first time he sees her telling him to kill. This is not the first time we see him talking to her when she's not there, because she's in his room somewhere middle of the season.
Right,
telling him things, and she's not there.
Doesn't she say the same thing? Like, you know what you have to do when we see him when we see her with him, it's about the belt, and then he needs to like go get the belt from Shelby, yeah. Mm-hmm. So I thought she said the same thing. I thought she said like, you know what you have to do.
I'm sure it's something along those lines, but she's just instructing him on what he should do. But in this case, when it comes to Shelby, you know, Deputy Shelby, he is doing this out of protection of his mother.
Yeah.
Right? This is his screw up. And I think any one of us, if we did something like that was going to compromise someone we love, I'd be having conversations with myself in my head through them being like, you know what you got to do here. You got to get out there and get that fucking belt back. So this, even though, yes, he's insane, right? And like he's literally seeing her in his head. I still understand the reasoning behind it. And at that point, I wouldn't completely consider him insane, but like knowing now that he actually is seeing her, then I'm like, he needs help. But when he kills the teacher, this is where Norman steps over a new line, right? Like the first kill, the dad is protecting Norma. The second time he attacks somebody, it's protecting Norma. It's because she's being raped. The third time he attacks someone, it's because Dylan is talking shit about his mom and he's defending her. Mm-hmm. The fourth time he does something that's crazy and illegal and compromising and dangerous, it's because he's trying to protect his mother, right, by going and getting this belt. And it's when he goes and kills his teacher, that is the first time where he's not protecting his mother anymore. This is something else. This is, for me, Norman clearly has a sexual desire for his mother.
Yes.
That he puts through Bradley.
Yeah.
It doesn't work out. He's furious. And then there's this older woman who's coming into his life who's like a mother figure who's sexualizing him. And it's like he wants that from his mom. And so Norma, he creates this like jealous mom that wants him to get rid of the competition.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I don't know that there's a real connection to it, but both his teacher and Emma have dark hair and dark eyes. Mm-hmm. And okay. I know that like we were talking about how Bradley has like blonde hair and lighter colored eyes, so she like looks a little more like his mom.
Sure, she has the features.
He has like a type.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, his character is really complex. I don't know. I don't know if he's like creating a jealous mother figure or if that's just because that's how she acts anyway. So it's not like he has to make her into a jealous mom. Like she already is. But it's the figure in his head. Yeah, but that's what I mean though. It's not even like I don't feel like he's misrepresenting her in his head. Like his delusion of her is his mom. Like that is how she acts and what she says. Yes and no.
And the reason I say no is because if we compare it to the film, in the film, Norma through Norman's head. What we know of Norma in the original film is only what we get through Norman's head. When you go to Psycho 4, then you get actual Norma, right? The Olivia Hussey performance of Norma, and we get to see more of that. And if you want to consider that canon to the original, fine. And I do. So you can say it. But if we're just sticking to the original film, what we know of Norma in that film and in the fourth one, so you can lump it in there with it as well. She is very conniving, but also like she thinks that sexuality is disgusting, and that like even though she's a total hypocrite, right? Because she is fucking this dude in the fourth film.
Oh, sure.
Right? She's like making Norman go get her tea, her iced tea and shit for her, like after they've had sex loudly upstairs. Like she's a total hypocrite. But she thinks Norman's sexuality, because she hates men, right? Because of the dad. The dad left and she's pissed off at men. Very Carrie's mom, right? And Carrie, very similar kind of thing. Men are disgusting, and you know, because Norman gets a boner and all this stuff, she gets down on him. And we're talking about Psycho 4. But in this, Dylan mentions that he goes to Bradley to get laid, and she kind of comes at him like, oh, where were you? You were just out getting laid, kind of thing. And it's not as dismissive of his sexuality. It's more of like he's a traitor to like picking sex over her, right? So I do find that there is a bit of a switch, because she's not as repressive as Norma in the films as, you know, as she is in the show. In this show, she's more like she's manipulative and abusive and all that stuff like Norma is, but when sex is brought up, the two times we really even discuss sex in the show is the number one, when she accuses him of going and getting laid while she was out doing something. And then the second time is when she tries to talk to him about like, well, if you're going to be having sex with people, you can't, you know, you need to wait because you're still a kid. Like it's a pretty normal mom conversation, right? Like,
I mean, yeah. I just want to say, like, I agree with you as far as what you were saying about her, but I don't think that is, I think that he still is representing her correctly in his head, because even though she's not as sexually repressive as she is in maybe the films, she still is jealous when she's like, you're picking sex over me. And that's how she acts in his head, like at the end. So that's what I mean. Like, I don't think that he's making a totally different version of her. Or not totally different, but like, I still feel like it's a pretty accurate like depiction.
She's demonstrative, but she's not repressive as much in this.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like in his head,
yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Like she's how she is in real life as she is in his head in this show. She doesn't seem to act very differently. Like I think he has her. Like, you know, they're very connected, and it's obviously in a negative way. And then also, before you go on...
No, I'm sorry.
I think I already forgot what I was going to say.
No. I just don't want to forget what
I
have
to say. The other time... yeah, but the other time that they were talking about sex was also whenever she was describing her brother and how he would rape her. So he has that image. And then what you were saying about it being a normal conversation about sex, I don't feel like it was normal. Because I feel like the way she was talking about it was like really weird, where she was obviously projecting like what happened in her childhood when she was being raped as like it changes a woman, and like not to say that it doesn't change people, but like the way she was describing it was like almost a negative thing, like you're gonna change a girl just for your own pleasure kind of a thing. And I don't feel like that's
this is a pretty standard kind of mother reaction on like the more conservative side of things, which is a very repressive usually, but that's a pretty typical like God-fearing kind of response, but like trying to do it through the guise of like, oh, you know, you're not ready to take on that responsibility, and to try to make it sound scary. Right, like, oh, you're gonna change this girl, and you're not gonna know what you're doing, and you're just using her for sex. And you're right in that moment, she's saying that because of what her brother did to her. You don't know that yet because she doesn't reveal that till episode 10. But I think maybe that wasn't your childhood, but I think it's not like everybody's by any means. There's no general kind of sex talk. But I think that it's probably matches up with 25-30% of people's mother talk. These are just arbitrary, made-up numbers.
So, you know, maybe there is a difference in how, like, a mom would talk to her son about it. But I just felt like that whole conversation, and it is partly because of her performance and like what she puts into Norma, like there's always some like underlying reason why she's doing something and why she says things. And I feel like that just came across very heavily in that scene. Like because she's not the loving, she's not the like, she is a loving mother, but she's not the healthy loving mother.
Sure.
You know, so I definitely felt that was an awkward conversation and not a great one.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not defending Norma. Norma's nuts.
No, I know.
She's a horrible person.
She's insane.
Yes.
Too. She's so insane.
Yeah. So what I was going to say, though, is that if comparing Norma TV to Norma movie from part 1 and part 4, the difference here for me for sure is that, and it's probably because like Emma is the safer choice, and she thinks that like either Emma's a better girl or she's like a nicer girl. She won't fuck him. But regardless, she is trying to set Emma and Norman up together, and I just feel like the Norma from the movies would be like, you're not dating any girl. No girl's coming around you. Don't even look at another girl. So the fact that she like takes Emma out, she bonds with her, she hires her at the motel, she's pushing them to like hang out. She doesn't get upset at all. In fact, she's very excited when they're going to the dance together. This is the stuff where I'm saying she's nowhere near as sexually repressive.
No, I agree with you.
Because of Emma.
I think that's also probably because like the times, right? Like it's a more modern take, so her being like overly sexually oppressive might not.
But it would still line up with
line up
who Norman becomes, right?
Well, the way that she acts still lines up. And also I think that with Emma, she doesn't feel threatened by her because she has a low life expectancy. Like that's kind of the main thing that like after she like asks her how long she's expected to live, that's when she gets like all excited about them being together and is like trying to encourage Norman to be with Emma.
I mean, this of course is ironic, seeing as how we know Norma's life expectancy is much less.
Yeah. But she doesn't know that.
No, she
doesn't. And so she,
that.
I think, is just like trying to plan for like, well, he can like have a girl for a little bit and then he'll come back to me and like.
Sure,
I mean, doesn't want him to leave.
It is very possible that the appeal of Emma is that she'll die, and Norman will need her again.
Yeah.
And if she Norman's eventually going to date somebody, right? Like that's just, you have to accept that fact that you're unless you have some like asexual kid or something, your kid is gonna blossom. He or she is going to go out and date and move on. And, not to get too personal, but this lines up with some parts of my life, unfortunately, with my mother. And so I definitely feel like I can speak very confidently on this matter with how women like that function and their intentions. And so, yeah. But regardless, I'm just saying that while your take is, I think, interesting when you said it's more modern, I guess I always look at the Norman from Psycho as is there like, is it nurture versus nature kind of thing? With Norman, both, right? Because his mom is fucking crazy, right? So she's passed down the gene, and then she's also abusing him. But I've always thought, and I've always taken it, that Norman's like catalyst, that is key motivator for his condition outside of whatever genetics, but the thing that really like set him off is his mother's sexual repression. It's always been tied to that for me. It's that he looks at Marion Crane through the little peephole and gets aroused, and the mom's like, she's a whore, kill her, right? Like everything's about like women being whores, and his sexuality. As I said in part 4, he gets a boner. She's like, what the fuck, I'm your mother, like how could you? And then locks him in the closet, until he, whatever. So it's always been about sexual repression with me, and I feel like this Norma thus far after season 1 is not as sexually repressive. She's just more manipulative.
Yeah.
in a more passive aggressive, subtle way.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. She's very passive aggressive.
Because the Norma in the films is very overt, right? She's very aggressive and is like, you little, sexual deviant kind of thing. And with Norman, she's the Norma in this is not like that. She's more like, I'm playing the sweet, caring mom, and like, oh Norman, like you could never leave me, right? It's a much more soft Norma, even though she can be bombastic and crazy. But
yes, but she doesn't like insult him. Like, I mean, she doesn't call him like horrible names or anything. Right. She's just, like you said, like passive aggressive, where like if he doesn't do something that she wants, she like pouts and just is like in a shitty mood and makes him feel like it's his fault and everything.
That being said, though, we do now I guess the share of this gets split up a bit, right? And that's the introduction of Dylan, which we can talk about next, right? Norman has a brother. Now, whether or not Norman had a brother before in the movies that we don't know about, it doesn't appear so. Part 4 never includes a brother, so this seems to be something wholly original for the show. And I feel like it kind of breaks Norma up into two, the same woman, but just kind of divvying out different parts to different kids, right?
Yeah.
So the name calling and all of the hatred goes towards Dylan.
Yeah.
And all of like the possessive, repressive woman goes towards Norman. Yeah.
She's horrible with Dylan.
Sure.
There was like a scene in like episode 2 or something where she's like saying that she hates him. Yeah. And it's so venomous and like awful to like think of a mom saying that to her like kid and like how much she means it. And it just sucks. But it's really interesting to see Dylan because obviously he went through like a similar upbringing as Norman, and he's still messed up, but it's a different kind of messed up. In some ways, Yeah. Obviously, the whole Bates family has problems, but it's just really interesting.
And this is something I can speak on too, because I was my mother's favorite, and it really created this like schism in the family where my brothers hated me, and I was always like, I don't want her affection. I don't want the attention. I would love for her to give it to you because she was like, I don't give a shit what they do.
Right, it's like
and they craved her affection desperately. And I got all of her attention, which I wanted none of. I wanted to be the one who got to have freedom and go out and do whatever the hell I want and be left alone because they didn't know what was going on. So they didn't, because I wasn't going to tell them. But like, so then they would be like, oh my God, like you son of a bitch, you stole mom. And it's like, do you think I asked for this? So I do feel that dynamic here between Dylan and Norman, which is very similar to me and my brothers growing up. And so I feel that. And this show is very emotional for me when I watch it because, it does hit so close to home. Norman does remind me of people I know, unfortunately, one of them being my mother, obviously. So yeah, I think this is done super well. And very believable because these kinds of relationships very much exist where you have the favorite child and then you have the child you shit on. And Norma does that. God, Vera is so fucking fantastic in this show. If I had to pick between the two who gives the better performance, it's kind of almost tied for me, but like I'll have to give it to Vera because there is, with Norman is always, I told you while we were watching, it always seems crazy, right? He, even when he's like sweet and he's really into Bradley and he's all like, oh, there's some craziness behind his eyes, which is great because he's Norman Bates and I get it. But with Vera, there is as well, but she's able to go through so many different ranges of person in this.
Yeah. I love both of them, honestly, but yeah, she's just like, she's very iconic in this, and memorable in so many ways, but I think both of their performances are, like, phenomenal. Yeah. And, like, as you said, like, that craziness that's in Norman, like, I like that it's there, I like that he's, a teenager, so he's going through all these hormones as well, and it's, like, it's not just his insanity that he's dealing with, but also, like, all the other regular issues that teens normally go through. But with her, like, yeah, she does have a lot of range that she covers.
So now, as far as the storyline goes, we move to town. She's got a new hotel. She's trying to get, or motel, that she's trying to get up and off the ground. There's a new bypass coming into town. This, of course, is a reference to the original film where Norman's like, no one comes around here anymore because of the bypass. So this is included from the original film. And this is before it was built, of course. And there's a guy who is pissed because his family lost the house. They grew up there. It's the family house. And so he wants to give them shit. Norma's not taking any of it. And so he tries to forcibly give it to her, quite literally, by raping her. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty intense scene. I mean, he is raping her. It's not like he awful. Tried. He's full on raping her when Norman comes home from sneaking out.
Yeah.
Norma, of course, violently murders him, which applause. But, of course, this sets them down a series of unfortunate events from there.
Yep.
Because now Norman's killed, and now Norma's killed, and the cat's out of the bag, and it's just all hell is broken loose, and the Bates family has completely lost it and has free range to pretty much do whatever they want from there. And Dylan even joins in on the fun, killing Shelby later on, so every one of the Bates in this gets a kill count.
Yep.
With Norman killing 2 people and Norma and Dylan killing 1 respectively. So, so we get that. Now, the Shelby being Norma's, like, she's, okay, do you get the impression that Norma is fucking Deputy Shelby because she's into him? Or do you feel like she's kind of whoring herself out to get something that she needs?
I think she's trying to be manipulative and get what she needs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's been the case for the entire show so far.
She uses her sexuality as an attribute.
Yes, and I don't feel like she genuinely really cares about anybody. She cares about what they can give her and how they can make her feel and that kind of a thing.
Do you think she cares about Norman?
I think she thinks she cares about Norman. So maybe he would be the closest thing to like a real like love that connection. She has. Yeah.
Sure.
But it's only because, I mean, she's like, obviously heavily projecting on him and trying to get him to be more than just a son to her.
So now the Asian sex slave ring between Shelby and Abernathy, or whatever the fuck his real name is. How did you feel about this storyline's inclusion?
Fine with it. I mean, like, that's what I was saying earlier, is that I like the mystery that the town has, because where that will go, like, I'm very curious about Romero, and like I still don't really know how I feel about him, because like he's kind of a good guy but also not, like he's really sketchy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was fine with the Shelby, Asian sex ring thing.
She was fine with it.
I'm not fine. I didn't approve of it. I was fine with it being like included, because I mean, like, you do need to have other things going on in the town. Obviously, it can't just only be Norma and Norman. Like, there needs to be other stuff happening, and it's stuff that they're getting involved in, and like, putting Norman in these like positions where his like urges and his blackouts and whatever can actually come into play.
Sure.
So, yeah.
And what about Dylan? Let's talk about Dylan for a minute. How do you feel about his inclusion, the brother coming in?
I think it's really interesting. I like seeing, like you were saying, I think that Norma is sort of split into 2 personalities with her sons. And I think that their relationship is fascinating. Dylan and Norman's relationship is fascinating. I feel really bad for Dylan. I feel like he's like tried to pull himself away from his mom and like and all her like awfulness. And now he's back because he lost his job, and like he's kind of getting sucked back into it, which isn't his fault, but I feel really bad for him, because I think he's always trying to do the right thing, but he's also getting involved in like, the drug industry and like,
Yeah.
you know, so, but that's like a mark of his, you know, like the problems he has from childhood and from Norma.
Sure.
Like he's not able to kind of have like a normal, like healthy job. So.
Yeah, I mean, at some point you got to put some blame on him, right? Like he's 23 years
right.
old.
Like that's why I'm
he's
like.
got some blame to shoulder for sure, but
Of course.
at the same time, he is a product of Norma Bates, and we all know how that turns out. So I can cut him some slack, and I do think that, you know, he kind of reminds me of something like, you know, Jimmy McGill or Saul Goodman, right?
Yeah.
Where he's like, he is fucked up, but like he does ultimately try to do the right thing.
He does.
Right.
And especially I feel like that comes through heavily with him and Norman. I feel like he's really trying to do the right thing with his brother.
Yes.
Like he's looking out for him. He tries to get him out of the house. He tries to get him away from Norma. He tries to tell him like, hey, like this is what she did to me. Like she's poison, all this stuff. And unfortunately, Norman is also just too far gone, I think, already, you know, but, yeah, I like him. I feel really bad for him, and I definitely think he's going to end up like having something blamed on him or taking the fall for somebody, or something bad's gonna happen where he's trying to do the right thing, and it turns out not good.
We shall see.
So,
How do you feel about Bradley and Emma, the two love interests? Even though everyone in this show seems to have a hard-on for Norman.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, all the hot chicks in this are all about Norman, even Mom.
Even Mom. Yeah. I like both of them. You know, Emma's really sweet. Like, she's just a sweet girl. Like, you know, I feel like Bradley's actually a little bit has more happening in her to make her more interesting as a character. In some ways, just because she's, like, dealing with the death of her dad and, you know, kind of tormented by all of that. And Emma is she is a nice girl, you know? Like, she's not malicious. Not that you have to be an interesting character or anything, but I don't want, like you were saying when we were watching the show, like, I want Emma to be happy.
Yes.
But I don't want her to be with Norman because, like, he's clearly not the right person for her in so many ways.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is the tough thing about the show, right? It's like, Emma's clearly the better person.
Yes.
She's the better pick in every way for me. But it's like, and you want her to be happy. It's like everything you just said. It's you're rooting for Emma to be happy because she's so attached to Norman.
Yeah.
But like, you know, you're like, Emma, no. Don't be into him.
Yeah.
He's crazy. He's not the guy you want to be with. You're going to get hurt way worse. So like, knowing all that stuff, you know, like, better, right? And so you're rooting for her, but you're also like, get out of town. Like somebody else, right? That's what you want. You want her to date somebody else. You want her to be into somebody else because Norman is, she's way too good for Norman.
Yes.
So, and she definitely does not need to be living her very short amount of time she may have left with a freaking serial killer. So, there's that. And yeah, so Romero kills Abernathy, tells him like, hell no.
Yeah.
I can't imagine with guys like that there's not just one to replace him coming.
I know. That's what I was thinking.
I mean,
too.
I've already seen the show, so I know what happens. But you already alluded to that, so you already kind of had that coming. So we definitely have that unresolved currently. Mm-hmm. We've got Dylan not being able to leave this business that he got into, right? His little partner there, who's older and jealous of him, is like, you know, you can't leave. So that's a problem.
Yeah.
That's going to have to get resolved. You got the Romero situation. Is he on the level? Is he not? You know, now you've got dirt on each other. So where's that going to go? Mm-hmm. The teacher has been murdered. Yep. And you've got investigations on that. You've got Norma now who thinks the only reason I don't want him down is because he might drink that water.
Oh, sorry.
And that water is going to be disgusting. We have a leaky AC unit, and a repairman is coming any minute to fix it, and it is 11:30 at night. But he had to come because that's the apartments we live in. So, but we can wrap this up here in a couple minutes. But yeah, I mean, overall, you're really here for Norman and Norma.
Yes.
Right? And everybody else is just there to add to the drama and to the mystery and to all of that stuff. But yeah, a really well crafted first season. Yeah, is it a little dramatic? Is there a little, added conveniences of like sex slave rings and everything? Yes. The repairman is here, so we're going to cut it off there. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Okay, guys. Bye.